name's Nick Ledger. I work for a company called Atkins. Atkins is a global design, engineering, project management consultancy, and we've got 18,000 staff spread all across the world. So a big thing for us is how do we collaborate and be more efficient? Fundamentally, as a kind of construction consultancy, our service is our people. And our people, it's really all about their knowledge and what they do for our clients. My role specifically is really to look at knowledge management and collaboration piece. So how can we better connect our people, their ideas, their knowledge together to be more effective internally? So Atkins has been on quite an interesting journey over the last 3 years. We've really tried to get the business to start thinking about how can I be more collaborative, how can I share my knowledge? You know, we've got architects in Dubai, in New York, in London. They're all doing really great jobs and they've all got really great knowledge, but how can we get them to share that with each other? So over the last few years, we've been introducing new systems, new processes, all focused around getting the staff to think digitally. And by sort of talking about thinking digitally, I'm not talking about necessarily the technology. Think about it in the same way as an analog radio. So analog radio produces music and radio shows. Digital radio does exactly the same thing, but in a slightly different, more effective way. So we're really going through a process at the moment of trying to get ourselves ready because we recognize that in the future, we need to be more effective with our knowledge or we're going to quickly find ourselves, like the Sony Walkman we saw earlier, being disrupted by other industries.
When we think about collaboration, and Zoe talked about it a little bit earlier, it's really important to think about what it is as an organisation that you're trying to achieve, because all too often you see people collaborating in formal or informal scenarios with no real sense of purpose. So at Microsoft, to use our strapline and our ethos, it's about empowering every individual on the planet to achieve more. And when we think about our collaboration tools, we're thinking about things like promoting simplicity. We're thinking about helping people to unlock their inner creativity. And we're also thinking about how do we really promote a sense of teamwork. Microsoft isn't unique in its structural makeup. We have people that range from baby boomers right the way through to Gen Zs and everything in between. And they all have a requirement to collaborate in really, really different ways. We also have geographic disbursement to concern ourselves with, both outside of the UK and across the UK, both internally with our own organisation and externally with our customers and our partners. So the tools that I work on, being Skype for Business, Teams and Yammer, is all about thinking about how do you pull those fundamentals together to promote the foundations that I sort of alluded to a little bit earlier.
It's 3.5 years since I've been in the whirlwind of the NHS. I'm the CIO for South London and Maudsley. I think we'll go into detail in a sec on that. But I also chair the London CIO Council, which is all the providers come together every 2 months. We look at policy, how we can collaborate and innovate, etc. Yes, my background is predominantly in the games industry and digital marketing. So I worked for Sony PlayStation. You mentioned Sony there.
Did you have a what?
EA Games, yes, I did. I've had all sorts of products from Sony, as you can imagine. I still have them. So with regards to the NHS, so our trust last year was nominated by NHS England to become what's called a global digital exemplar. So basically they could see what we were doing, they could see the vision we had that was joined up with our clinical strategy. And what that means is it's a 3-year program with additional funding, matched funding, to fully digitize and create digital services and interventions for the populations that we serve.
I should say Stephen sadly might need to disappear towards the end of this session because he's got a very important meeting. But Kerry, tell us about the process at Microsoft and what's the question about collaboration that you get asked the most frequently?
How to do it?
How to do it.
So I think one of the questions when I'm presenting to customers, one of the things that comes out most frequently is we've got a whole plethora of information available to us. Our employees find it really hard, confusing, complicated potentially, to know which information to access and where, but more importantly, which tool to use and when to use it. So one of the things that I try to talk about is let's think about what information it is you're trying to surface or potentially what information it is you're trying to share, and then let's work backwards from there, because actually technology should be an enabler. Technology shouldn't be your starting point. So that's weird coming from a technology company, but is absolutely true. What's also important is to think about reducing the complexity, and I think HR have got a really important part to play here. I read an interesting research document a couple of weeks ago that told me, as individuals, we check our devices, whether that be a mobile device or a desktop device, up to 150 times a day. And that can scale across between 8 to 10 different applications. So some of you have talked about Slack and Facebook and Google and WhatsApp and Instant Message and Skype for Business and Teams and Yammer. And, you know, we could really go on with that. But the important thing here is, how do we reduce the complexity and in turn unlock individual creativity? And I think that's the thing that we try to talk about, and then we'll take customers through a journey of a workshop to really help them understand exactly what that means and the intricacies that can involve.
Yeah, it's certainly a daily frustration for me is just finding the right information at the right time.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Tell us a bit about working at such a huge organisation and so how you've made collaboration work between all these disparate elements.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We get to speak with lots of different people, lots of different cultures, and each of them have their own different objectives or what they want to deliver for their clients or their projects or their teams. So our journey to collaboration really started about 3-4 years ago when we first released an enterprise social network called Yammer, as many of you probably know, into the business. And this was really our first chance to try and break down the levels of hierarchy. You know, a lot of people wanted to get their voice heard, they wanted to share their ideas, but they didn't really have the platform. You know, we had the old message boards that most people probably have on their intranets, but really we needed something that was a bit more collaborative, a little bit more open to the whole business and more widely used. So we released Yammer, and instantly it was a huge success. We had groups popping up around innovation and sharing ideas. We had regional groups being set up, knowledge sharing groups, even a few social groups being set up. We're really helping to build a culture of, actually, just because I'm working in a certain location, I don't need to just work with the people local to me. There's a whole network of people out there. So that was really a big starting point for us. And ever since then, we've been really trying to push that agenda with people that actually working collaboratively doesn't necessarily mean the technology, it's about the people. So how can you find the right resource, the right person, and really connect with them directly, whether it's through Yammer, Skype, or any other collaborative platform.
And going back to that point, Stephen, that Kerry made about getting the right access to information at the right time, you've got 4,500 people.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea just to give everyone a little bit of context around the mental health side of things. So we are probably the largest in the UK. So we've 4,700 staff. We have 4 hospitals. We operate out of around 90 sites. We provide services for addiction, eating disorders. We've got a medium secure unit. And we've got a very long history. So just for everyone's benefit, in 1247, the first asylum was formed called the Bethlehem, right? And that's part of our hospital group now, so the Royal Bethlehem. And from that, the word Bedlam came from, so because it was an asylum. And so in 2013, we had a Channel 4 documentary called Bedlam, and in 2016, another Channel 4 documentary, Life on the Psych Ward. So it's a big, complex organisation. We're split into clinical and academic groups because we've got a great relationship with King's College, Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience. So together we work on research programmes and look at how we deliver services, look at the data and how we can provide interventions to population of local population, 1.5 million, Southwark, Lewisham, Lambeth and Croydon.
Right. And we touched upon it earlier, but sort of confidentiality and security is an issue for every organisation, but for you working in those areas, it's even more important, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So every NHS organisation has to abide by the information governance, the IG toolkit, and you get measured on it every year. So I've got a large team. The head of information governance reports to myself, and the very early days of starting to use some of the Microsoft products and the platform, we had information governance at the table. We met with some of the key people in the UK in terms of security, etc. And we also have someone who's dedicated to privacy impact assessments. We've got a cloud clearance model, so we know exactly where our data is going and where it's going. And it was back in 2016. There was a Telegraph announcement that Microsoft was releasing UK Azure data centres, and the only 2 organisations were on it were South London Maudsley, SLAM, and the MOD. Right. So if it's good enough for the MOD, it's good enough for us.
Kerry, tell us a little bit about Enterprise Connect. You took part in it. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what nuggets you learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that aren't aware, Enterprise Connect is a global conference that takes place in Orlando annually. It's the collection of the biggest unified communications vendors around the world, so people like Cisco, Facebook, Slack, etc. Some of the real nuggets, apart from, and I have to get it out there, I apologise, winning Best in Show from Microsoft Teams. Sorry, I said I wouldn't do that, but couldn't resist. Apart from that, there were some really fantastic things that came out. And for me, it was all around intelligence. And I think, Zoe, you started to talk about it a little bit earlier. For me, I started to think about what does intelligence really mean for us as individuals? And if we think about the way that we work at home, you know, many of us will wear a Garmin watch, which is intelligent enough to know when we've sat still for 45 minutes, it will prompt me to move. It's intelligent enough to tell me at the end of a workout how much recovery I need. Wouldn't it be fantastic if the tools that we used at work were intelligent enough to give us the insights? And again, you know, I think some of the previous speakers have talked about this. When we go into a meeting, regardless of whether that be a remote meeting or an in-person meeting, we often find ourselves immediately on the back foot. And that can be for a number of reasons. Potentially, your diary is booked back to back, so you arrive a couple of minutes late and you miss the introductions. There'll be various other reasons. One of the things that inhibits our productivity as humans is not knowing who it is that's in the room. So I think all of us have been party to that. We've arrived at a meeting, we haven't known this person across the room, and therefore we just don't know how we want to behave. We don't know what the appropriate level of behaviour or the expectation is from us. One of the things we talked a lot about at Enterprise Connect is bringing intelligence into the meeting and really promoting both a fantastic user experience, but also that knowledge that you need. So, for example, let's just say I have a meeting with these guys. Using Microsoft Teams and the graph and artificial intelligence, it will surface up information about the individual, so I'll know who they are. More importantly, I'll know what interests them, I'll know what projects they've been working on previously. Using that knowledge will enable me to decide how I should be behaving, but it'll also enable me to think about the role, to your point again, that I'm going to take in that meeting. We also talked a lot about accessibility and making sure we're really thinking about diversity and inclusion. And I think for everyone in the room, diversity and inclusion is something that's important to us. But what's really important is we think about how we address that. And again, we made some really exciting announcements about things like inline message translation and the ability to use things like the Microsoft Stream, which is a video tool, to really promote that. So again, for me, those were the two most exciting things. Thinking about how we bring what we just expect at home into our working place, and then thinking about how we really do extend our portfolio of offering to make sure that we're really covering that diversity and inclusion aspect.
Guys, I'm conscious of time. Again, we're going to run out of it soon. So if you have any questions immediately, we'll ask one more and we'll come out to you in a sec. Nick, just tell us, you know, this session's about the future of collaboration. Just tell us what you think from your experience are going to be the tools and the software that are going to be important in the future of collaboration.
Sure. So I think the cloud, as you just mentioned then, is going to be really important, not just from the idea of putting documents on there, but that intelligence piece. So actually being able to collaborate and access information without actually realizing that you're doing it. If you look at something like Delve, which is a sort of a powerful search and discovery tool, it automatically surfaces content if things will be of interest to you. No one's having to go out and dig for that information, it's just automatically providing it to me. So, and the best technology is always the one that you don't really know is there or doing its stuff behind the scenes. So definitely sort of the cloud. I think we're going to be looking at a lot of things like Teams, sort of one-stop shops to bring in all these different services together. In the same way in our personal lives, we've got so many different services, and in the workplace, it's exactly the same. Whether it's email, Skype, Yammer, Facebook, Slack, everything we've mentioned today, there's a lot of choice. And whilst we try to encourage staff to use certain platforms, there's always requirements to use others, whether it's a client requirement or supplier. So I think we'll start to see more of these collaboration hubs, these one-stop shops that bring in these services together. because I think that's really the direction it has to go. But alongside that, I think what we're going to see in the wider kind of aspect, aside from the tools, is really a better understanding of information security. So I think like both have mentioned today, and with the example we mentioned before with Facebook, people are realizing that actually I need to make sure that my information is secure, and that can sometimes be a blocker to collaboration when people are so worried about the security of it that they don't share it. So actually it could be an opportunity as well for us to put processes in place so people trust the platforms, trust what's going to happen with their data, and then they can collaborate more effectively. So yeah, they're probably the key areas, I think.